Hey there, my name is Nikhil Prakash, and I'm here to introduce to you my new series of videos called Talking About Feelings. This is episode 0. What does that mean? It means that I shot a bunch of episodes last year, 2020, during quarantine and lockdown. I wanted to do an episode 0 because I never actually talked about why feelings. What does that mean? Why talk about feelings, right? Like usually feelings is something that scares people away. Right, and it's kind of become a joke in my life because when they always go, "Oh God, Nikhil's going to want to talk about feelings." I always could feel things really strongly. I'm very sensitive and things affect me really deeply. But I grew up surrounded by nobody else who I experienced was like this. Everybody was pretty cerebral and left-brained and did not really understand what it meant to feel things. I grew up kind of being taught that feelings aren't important. It's about solutions and problems and taking action and all of these things, which are fine, but it didn't solve my feelings and the things I felt. We live in a society that doesn't want to talk about feelings in general. And then on top of it, being a male, I was definitely discouraged. And so I felt very out of place for most of my life. When I would feel these intense, heavy emotions, I learned to analyze, and it only made it worse. I would be analyzing the problem that I thought triggered those emotions, and I would be like, why isn't it going away? Why is it getting worse? Because it's like, and I would tell people, they would say, well-meaning, they would be like, well, just, look at the problem and move on, right? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to think my way out of the problem. But it's like my analysis, my left brain and my feelings are two languages that don't talk to each other. And if I would say things, well, I feel it here, nobody knew what the hell I meant. Like, what do you mean you feel it here? Like, because they didn't necessarily have access to how and where they feel things in their body. So why are feelings important? Well, I found that because I was taught to avoid feelings, like most of us are, to not feel them, when I avoid it, they end up controlling me and coming out in self-sabotaging, toxic ways. That's what happens. An example that maybe you can relate to, somebody says something, right? And it triggers something and you don't even maybe notice the trigger right away, you respond. What is really happening there, if you take a breath and pause, and this is a practice, there are feelings that are triggered when that someone says something. Between that stimulus and that reaction, there is a gap, and in that gap, there are feelings that arise. When we don't take the time to acknowledge it and feel it, what we do is we unconsciously project it back onto the other person. That other person will project it back onto us, and so on and so forth. So it creates this toxic cycle. When we have an event, whether that's someone saying something or a relationship or a boss at work, and we feel these things, and we may not even be aware we feel it, and we get into this disarray of dysfunction and toxic thinking and depression, that is actually coming from suppression. And what that means is, depending on the situation, the event could legitimately trigger emotions that are new and coming up. So if a loved one dies, it is very natural to grieve and feel mourning. If you just had a breakup, it is very natural to mourn the death of the relationship. You are supposed to feel sad. And then there's another category. What is triggered is not, you think it's from that other person or situation, but it's really deep-rooted, unfelt trauma from childhood coming up. And it's coming up to the surface. And it was always there, but it was kind of in the back, in what's called the unconscious or the subconscious controlling you. So there is a quote by Carl Jung: if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That sums up everything, because the unconscious expresses itself as feelings in the body. If we are able to be conscious of those feelings and actually feel them, then we begin to be in an empowering state in our own life where we can manifest our own fate. But if we do not become aware and feel these feelings, Bad news is they're not going anywhere just because you don't feel them. It's like I've seen little kids sometimes, they play a game of peekaboo. If the little kid is here and I'm here, I could be like, okay, close your eyes. And she'll put her hands over her eyes. And I go, where is she? I can't find her. Where is she? She doesn't realize she's right there. She thinks just by closing her eyes and becoming blind to everything that she's disappeared. It's the same way with feelings. You may think that they are gone because you are avoiding them, but they are right there, controlling you. They're not going anywhere. The only difference is now you can't see them. I went up until age 30 not knowing any of this, not knowing how to feel my feelings, not knowing what it is to be in my body, not knowing the importance and how much I was doing what I was taught unconsciously and avoiding my feelings, avoiding it through addictive behaviors, avoiding it through distractions, avoiding it through overanalysis, addiction to overanalysis and overthinking from the left analytical brain, avoiding it through perfectionism, avoiding it through so many different things. When I was around 30, I had a major breakup that just crushed my world and I was devastated. In the midst of yet another failed attempt at a relationship with a woman, in the quietness of my being, intended powerfully and swore to myself, I am never going to let this happen again. I am going to understand why this happened, and I'm never going to let it happen again. I shortly after met a yoga teacher, a man who was about 10 years older than me, who took me under his wing, taught me not only yoga, but was a personal coach for me. And I remember when I kind of told him my story and all these other things, he said, "Nikhil, you're emotional." I always heard that as an insult, so I'm like, yeah, I know. And he's like, no, I'm saying it as a compliment. Do you know how many people, how many men specifically want to gain access to the emotions and they don't know what that means? You're emotional. That means that that's the secret of you connecting with people and anyone you want. That is the secret to you manifesting what you want in your life. We're just going to teach you how to feel it and channel it. And what came into my mind was in X-Men, Cyclops, right? He has this power where he opens his eyes. If he opens his eyes, he can burn everything around him. But when he puts on these special glasses, he's able to channel it for his benefit. I started relating to emotions in that way, right? And started learning how to feel and channel them. The point of all this is the concept of feeling feelings is something I believe is very underrated, and I think we have avoided long enough. That's why I decided to do this and talk about this. We'll get into feeling feelings, how to do that, all those other things. I just want to thank you for tuning in here, at least allowing me to talk about my feelings so that you'll feel inspired to talk about yours. I'd love to hear what you come up with. You can share it in the comments below. If you would like to subject yourself to more of me talking about my feelings, you can subscribe, but just know you have been